Welcome back. We are going to make the rotating cube, and I know I've shared this with you before, but it has the 6 sides. But the neat thing about this is it's a 3-dimensional continuous flexagon. So you can see that it splays open, and eventually we'll go back to that first starting point. And we're going to do our version out of paper, and so what you should have received in your kit is both the handout and then also at least 4 sheets of this cover stock paper that's been printed, and we're going to utilize this to score and fold and put together our individual cubes that you see here. And so the best way to go about that is to score all those lines that you see, and then we're going to cut the exterior shape. This is your final shape, and so from here what you want to do is just bend those score folds for all the tabs and the flat planes, so we can see how we're going to put this together. There's no need to reverse folds for this one. You can see how this is going to wrap around to create that cube structure. So if I bring this end to end and glue that tab, that will secure that, and then I'll work on the ends. So we can begin gluing this. I start by gluing this outside tab, the one on the end there, and I'll bring this around to create that square shape. This begins our cube, and then what we can do is fold these tabs down and this one, and I'm going to apply some adhesive on those 4 sides and then bring this side down. And then I'll repeat for the other side. From here, we're going to do the exact same procedure for all 8 cubes. Once these are complete, we'll go over how to hinge them. Alright, we're ready to start hinging this, and you should see that all the cubes will be the exact same size. And if we're following along with the handout, which you'll see on the back side, does give a layout. There is a slight adjustment, so I'm going to send you a new digital copy for the handout. We actually have to rotate it twice in order to do the hinging. I'm glad that I did that in advance, but I was scrambling to get all this through. So if we're following this, you'll see that if I put it out in this layout, we're going to have 2 hinges on the left-hand side and 2 on the right. Now what I did with my tape is I prepared that ahead of time, and I'm using blue tape as opposed to the masking tape that was sent to you, just so you can see where those hinges are going to exist. And what I suggest doing, if you're working and it's a little cumbersome, you might need to just deal with them in sections, and then you can place it back where it needs to be. Then from here, what we're going to do is go to the step where you are actually going to bring the 2 cubes towards you, lay on their side, and the other 2 cubes you turn and lay it out that way. Now this is the change in the in terms of the handout, and I'll also demonstrate with this so you can see it a little more easily. Is this the orientation of the Finch cube, and we splayed that out. You'll see the 2 hinges on the right hand side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. So we have that, and in order to do the 2 final hinges that will complete the structure, we need to take this entire form and we splay out the sides. So you'll see that the 2 hinges exist on the top there. And that would complete the hinging for our cube. So what you can do to rotate this is these splay out. This opens up. This whole thing opens up here. There, there. Back to our original shape. Enjoy! I wanted to show you an alternative to the paper design, and thinking about using the museum board that was provided. The one thing that I did that made my life a lot easier was to cut 6 pieces on a mat cutter, and the thing that makes that a little different is that you can see that it creates these beautiful bevels. So essentially each side has to be cut to the exact same dimensions. It does need to be square for the structure, but you'll see that when we go to glue this together, they'll meet up perfectly like a window frame, as well as the top and the bottom. And I'll demonstrate that because that's how this gray one was completed. So let me get a few things out. We have some wax paper. And I like to make sure all the bevels, I can see those from my vantage point. And I'm just going to use straight PVA. Now, if you are not utilizing the beveled edge, if you don't have access to that, what you would need to do is to measure out each cube, keeping in mind that there's thickness to the board. So in terms of the wall sides, you could have those resting on top of a base like we did with our simple box, and also on, or it could rest on the inside. But regardless, the final dimensions of the cube must be even in all three directions. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. So when I have those beveled edges, I'm just going to put a little adhesive along that edge. I can bring up one of my sides. Make sure that's meeting up nicely. And I'm going to apply some adhesive on the adjacent side. And this one touches the side as well, so I'll do this edge. From here, all I have to do is glue the top four edges and lay this right on top. Nice thing about those beveled edges is that this will rest in there nice and neatly. And providing your cutting was all exact, you'll have a nice mitered cube on all sides. I do suggest placing some rubber bands along the outside edge just to keep it steady. You can also lift this up and double that over if you need to, just for greater stability, and let that dry for an hour. You're going to go ahead and complete eight cubes in order to do the rotating cube. And in a moment, I'll show you how to cover one of these cubes. Something else to keep in mind before you actually glue on that top piece is that if you're interested in some sort of sound element, you could place something inside there prior to sealing this up. Think about things that you might have available to you. It could be beads, it could be bells, it could be beans, and I'm going to use a little bit of rice today. And so you can control the pitch of the sound by how much you add. And also, you have to question, do you want to add it to every single cube or just some of them? And so once that's placed inside there, you can just glue this outside edge, like demonstrated before, and lay that on top. All right, we're ready to start covering. Keep in mind that for the cubes, if you have any irregular edges, you can always use your sanding board to kind of clean those edges up to make sure they're nice and crisp. It also depends on the covering material that you use, so the thinner it is, the more it's going to show any imperfections. So that's something to keep in mind. I did want to show you how to cover this from one continuous piece of covering material. And so I grabbed an orange sheet that hopefully the contrast will be nice for the camera. And essentially you want it to be able to wrap up on several sides. So thinking about the simple box that we made, so I know this is going to go up here. I know this will go up here, and eventually it needs to go up onto this other side as well. And so I suggest utilizing your glue mixture that perhaps you used for previous projects. And what you can do is just glue one of the surfaces of the cube. Place this in on here. And I know it's going to be a little cumbersome, but we're going to do a single covering material for this. And flipping it over and ensuring that it is smoothed out nice and flat. You can take your bone folder, or if you have a Teflon folder, smoothing that surface out. Definitely want to pay attention as it rests, because some covering materials will wrinkle more than others. So once I have that on there, This one side is going to come up here, and so much like we did for the simple box, is that we had taken our triangle and utilized this to make some strategic cuts. And so what I think would be most beneficial is, since I know this is going to come up here and I'll have a turn-in on this side, I'm going to have the turn-ons on those two sides as well. And so that's where you can actually utilize your cheater strip if you have it handy. And so thinking about, okay, this, I'm going to have a tab here, lay my cheater strip out. And then I know exactly where I need to cut. That way we can cut as we go. I'm just using the triangle to visually see how this is lining up. And from here, I'm going to apply the adhesive to this surface and smooth this out. Now, as a preemptive measure and also to decrease some of the bulk, what I'm going to do is actually take I can either use my triangle or I can use my metal ruler. And essentially from these sides, I'm going to do straight cuts all the way out, making sure that's lined up with one of those edges. As you can see there. And I'll do that for the opposite side as well. Get rid of some of that bulk. And then what we'll do is we'll do the cheater strip along this side, and you can use the triangle as a support system. So you can see how that's going to work. Start out with gluing the shorter side first. And then from here, I can just turn it on its side. And essentially, we're going to have some tabs, but what we can do with this is either use our triangle or our straight edge, and just cutting this straight out there. So you can see how that's going to release those tabs so we can glue those over to the side there. Now, if you find that those corners are too sharp, they're too straight angled, what you can do is you can actually create a slight miter. You could go as severe as your 45 degree. It is entirely up to you. I usually come off the corner edge just a little bit because you don't want that board to be exposed, but you can see how that will still cover this surface. And when we're working with this top tab portion too, we can actually just trim this down, and I'm going to use my cheater strip to get rid of that bulk. So from there, I'll turn that over. So I'm just going to take my time and glue out those individual hinges. I'm going to get some waste paper down here so I don't mess up any of my covering material. It's bubbling after the fact, so I am going to definitely go over this and make sure that it is sticking really well. So I do have several sides covered at the moment, and I could bring this up, but I'm going to go ahead and do the opposite side as well, so at least there's some continuity there. And so I'm going to go ahead and glue out this side of the board, and then bring that covering material over. And then I'll release those tabs on the side there again. So now that I have those on there, I can actually bring up these sides, or what I can do is just glue this over, and then I'm going to release that excess material. I could also make a turn in for this side to help even that out, and that's what I'm going to do. So for this, I'll just lift this up so you can see it. What you can do is create those mitered corners again. So that will get glued up there. And then that will get covered with this piece. And I'm going to turn around and do the same thing for the other side. Oops, I have some wrinkling there. So I'm going to spend a moment to smooth it out. You can see there is a little bit of overlap there. There's no harm in that. You just want to consider your covering material, and if for some reason you're pasting images on here afterwards, a lot of times what I'll do is cut a piece to sort of build that up so it's all the same height prior to gluing this final side down. Okay. So you'll see that that one piece that was wrapping all the way around is an overhang right now. And normally what I like to do is to let this completely dry, but just so it eliminates some bulk, what you can do is you'll trim along this edge to release that piece. And you'll see that it finishes off that edge really quite nicely. And then so from here, all I need to do is glue out this side and paste this up, and then you'll trim off that excess and do the same thing for the other side. And voila, you've got a covered cube. You need to do this 8 more times, and then you can think about your hinging. What I typically suggest when using binder's board or museum board to create the cube is that you want to make sure that you're using book cloth. It's just a lot stronger. The paper will eventually wear out, especially handmade papers, so it's something to consider. That it can also be incorporated into the design itself, and I realize this is not very exciting, but the tape you can see could be a visual component that is used throughout. But I hope you enjoy.